It is that magic power of thank you all for joining us to the Connect Boulder Fall Meeting. All right, you can clap after the speakers, it's fine. We've got a ton of great information for you, but our first speaker is on a bit of a time crunch, so we're going to get rolling here. We want to introduce you, we'll introduce our transportation team. You saw them for 30 milliseconds there, but no. Quick round of applause for our Boulder Chamber Transportation. We've got Karen Moringhouse up front, Darcy Kitchen on the other side, Elaine handling the ones and twos on the back there, and Will Shepard is probably shepherding some people as we speak. So there we go. All right, thanks to all of you, and special thanks to Amy in the back for getting us all set up today with the AV tech equipment as always. And once again, someone who needs no introduction. This guy. I'm Jonathan Singer, Senior Director of Policy Programs. Apparently, I just had my headshot taken today because I'm wearing the same jacket and shirt I was wearing 2 years ago. But I'm much happier to be here now than I was on my first day. So we'll take it from there. And we'll move on to the next slide. Like I said, we've got a chock full agenda today. Everything from talking about a huge ballot issue. By the way, what day is Election Day? You were all wrong. Election day actually starts about, in about half an hour. Actually, it's about October 5th, actually, because that's when people will be receiving their ballots. A lot of people don't get all the way to the bottom of the ballot. We have 14 statewide initiatives. A lot of people are going to get ballot fatigue and carpal tunnel. We want to make sure they hear about everything. So this is incredibly critical that we get this update, and then also that we get people out to vote their entire ballot, not just the top of the ballot. After that, we'll be excited to hear from the Executive Director of the Colorado Energy Office, Toor, who is already hydrating as we speak. And then following that, we'll get some updates from Transportation Connections and also a wonderful conversation with our friends from the University Center for Atmospheric Research. So if that didn't go fast enough for you, that's too bad, because we're going to go jump right into this, because I know our director has a meeting they need to jump to very quickly. So I'm going to hand it over to our able Lynn Guissinger.
Thank you so much, Jonathan. Thank you. I'm just going to step out of the way of my slides.
Well, that's gonna be the one in both the lavalier for the Zoom recording. And
there we go.
Okay, great. Thank you to the Boulder Transportation Connections and to Boulder Chamber for having me here today. I am Lynn Guissinger. I represent this area on the RTD board. I'm not here with my RTD hat because of campaign finance laws. So I'm here talking about the de-Brucing campaign. But I have so much appreciation for all of this team that you just saw and the rest of the chamber team, John Taylor and others. They've been huge supporters of both endorsing the ballot issue and, as Darcy did last night, filling in for me, giving the talk, and others have been real involved in spreading the word. As Jonathan said, RTD in most counties will be at the very bottom of a very long ballot. So vote all the way down. My hope is that only the people that know about it will vote all the way down. And will be supported, that we will see. So RTD in June, RTD board referred the ballot issue to continue an exemption from the Tabor cap. And the nice thing about the exemption from the Tabor cap is we can start off on the ballot by saying we're not imposing any new tax or increasing any tax rate.
And I can give you this.
Oh, great.
Then you'll be able to forward.
Thanks. This is the ballot issue. I'm not going to spend a lot of time going through it, but basically it says, without increasing any new tax, can RTD continue to retain the funds that it currently is getting? And the things we'll be using it for are the things that we are using it for now and intend to move forward using it for, which is increasing service, providing service to people with disabilities and people who are transit dependent, maintaining the properties, you've probably heard this summer, it was not a great summer with all the light rail issues, but some of those light rails are getting old now, and we have no choice but to maintain them. And it caused disruption, which I was very sorry to see. Because communication might have been better, but hopefully we're all done very soon. And one of the things that we just made permanent is our free fares for youth. And it's only funded by the state through this next year. That's the way they fund it. So there may be more money coming. Toor has been instrumental in making that happen. But we did make it permanent, so hopefully we can keep our money and continue to move that forward. Give you a quick primer on RTD's background. RTD is funded with a 1% sales and use tax. And that is actually now about 75% of our funding. There are some federal grants, state grants, fairs, a few other little things that they're going to. 0.6% of that is base system tax, which is the original tax that covers mostly the buses. And then 0.4% of that is the fast track tax that came about in 2004. The short version of this is that in 1995, 1999, and again in 2004, with the fast tracks ballot issue, the voters had voted 3 times to exempt RTD from the Tabor tax. And in November of this year, we will pay off bonds that exemption will end essentially. And that's what we're going back to ask the voters for. And when that happens, actually it's more like $660 million of RTD's revenues will be subject to the Tabor growth limitations. And the Tabor growth limitations are, many of you I think know, they set a cap so that it looks at last year's revenues, and in our case, it looks at the CPI and Denver, Aurora, Lakewood, plus some changes in the property tax, which is an odd thing in itself, that changes in the property tax that are capped. But if you hit that cap, then amounts above that have to be refunded to taxpayers. In Colorado, a couple of the counties that are still not Bruce under Tabor paying out 7% of their revenue generally. RTD probably will not be paying out every year. In fact, in the next 2 or 3 years, it doesn't look like we would be paying out much, although that calculation doesn't look at new money from the state and the potential for a recession or a downturn. The real scary part is when you have a recession or a downturn in the sales tax, that lowers the amount that you can keep and you have to start over again. So in our case, is that if you look back to the 2008 recession and the pandemic, in both of those cases, the year after, like in 2022, we would have returned about $50 to $60 million to taxpayers. So what does that mean? To RTD, that means a lot. It's, as I said, a number of different services that would end up probably being cut. But if we had to return $50 million, first of all, how is that done? It's a sales tax. You've got business visitors, you've got tourists, a lot of people coming in. There's no way to know how to return that in truly an egalitarian manner. And when we were when RTD was subject to the Tabor cap early on, before 1995, we were able to credit it back to Excel. Excel has said, no, we are not doing that again, which is because it will be an administrative nightmare. And those costs are also for RTD on top of the $50 million. So even assuming that we can figure out how we refund that money, we've got 3 million people in the district. Say we get 2/3 get the money back, 2 million people. We're talking $25, $30, something like that. It's really not, it's not like the state where you're getting a check for $700, $750. So it's a big difference. So why preserve our revenues? Well, first of all, the things I talked about, the services that we're providing, but the public transit, I don't think I even really need to go through this with this group. You know this well, but it's critical to advance equity and opportunity. The 20 to 40% of Coloradans can't drive for various reasons. They're seniors, they're adolescents, they're people with disabilities. And that I feel like is our chief mission, is to take care of the people that really need our services. But also it's part of, it's an important piece, and I'm sure Will would agree, electrification is a big way that they're moving towards addressing climate change and air quality, but we can't do it without public transit as well. And just also in terms of providing affordable transportation options, relieving congestion. And other things. We have strong grassroots support. As I said, we've had great support here. I'm going to the Boulder City Council tonight, and I know that you have a lot of good support there. Wurzel City Council endorsed it like before last. And if you go to our website, it's keepcoloradomoving.com. You can see we have over 100 organizations and many individuals who have endorsed it. It's Metro Mayor's Caucus, Denver Metro Chamber, the Boulder Chamber, Downtown Denver Partnership, and many others. The reason we were comfortable going to the ballot was we did some polling in April, and 68% of people said that they would support this. So we hope that sticks around. So we are making progress. RTD has lowered its fares this year for the first time in agency history. If you are going to Denver or anywhere on a regional basis, it's no longer $5.50, it's $2.75 everywhere except for the airport. In the airport, I still haven't figured out how we got to this number, but if you're over 65 and going to the airport, it's $1.35. A total no-brainer. I asked if the Rotary Club recently if people had ever used it, and I got all hands going. Most people know how expensive it is. And then, as I said, we're committed to needed maintenance. It's been a hard summer because of that, but it's important. So now's not the time to risk the funding. I know some people are saying we've had troubles with RTD. Cutting off our funding is not the solution. I think we're making some good progress. And so I appreciate your support at this point. If you or your organization want to endorse, you can go to keepcoloradomoving.com. And the biggest thing at this point is getting the word out. So if you're posting on social media, or you send out a newsletter, or you send out a voter guide to friends, please keep us in mind. I'm happy to send anyone a blurb. I'll get that to this team too, and keep us in your communications. I'm happy to answer questions.
All right, take questions from the adoring audience here. Wow, they love you so much that there's no questions. So, well, you know, I know you've got, oh, John.
Yeah, just a statement and an appreciation. So Lynn has been toiling away in the RT board, and it was not easy even to get the board to come around to agree to put this on the ballot to save funding that's critical to our services. So hats off and thank you to our leader.
You have electric buses?
Here, and I'm gonna repeat the question for the Zoom audience here first. So, electric buses was the question, right? So.
Yes, and we're studying, hoping to move more that way. With the buses we have right now, the buses, the free mall ride on 16th Street. We were one of the first agencies in the country to get electric buses in those buses. What we've discovered as we started to try to expand that, and it's been an ongoing conversation with board staff for quite a while, is that our facilities are getting old. And so we have undertaken a fleet of facilities transition plan. I think we're going to get the report on that before the end of this year. I think we'll get it in November and December. It's a big lift. And so, you know, getting that done, hopefully there'll be some IIJ money and other money still available at the federal level. But that's where we are. We're trying to move forward. Probably will do some transition in the facilities as well.
So you mentioned the substantial decrease in fares and such, and I'm curious in terms of like what's the reasoning for that choice in terms of to support primarily inducing more demand, or what issues maybe are co-presented with that from say reducing other revenue streams that are to be provided.
Repeat it.
Well, that was on the mic, so I think we can just forward the question.
Great. what's the reasoning for going with reduced fares? You know, our ridership is still down after the pandemic. You know, before the pandemic, we were moving over 100 million people a year. We're still at about between 65 and 70 million, and we want to bring our riders back. Part of that is bringing back the service we had before the pandemic. We do have, I expect, this has not come to the board yet to see exactly what they're bringing back, but what we're hearing and what I expect is that we will be bringing back some more significant service in January than we've been able to do before, because we have really been focusing, our staff has really been focusing on recruiting and retention to get the operators and maintenance people. It's the leading indicator to get us to the lagging result of more service. But that's really a big part of the reason we wanted to get our fares consistent. They were hard to understand. They had all these different zones, and we wanted to get them to a point where we bring riders back.
I have a comment, not a question. It made it so much easier because I've been from Boulder to Longmont last year and I had to ride the bus because of a kind of car issue. And having to pay that extra fee to go from Longmont to Boulder. It just makes it so simple. And then like, if you make it accessible to people, they're gonna use it, right? Create boundaries, then you might as well just get rid of the bus system done. Because who's gonna use it?
Well, sounds like we have a new candidate for RTE director after.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right, but feel free to respond if you want to, otherwise it's got time for one more question, so.
Thank you. Thanks for your service, because I'm certain it's sometimes like a combat zone here. Yesterday I read an article, I believe in NCAR, regarding blending the remaining fast track funds that were earmarked for the Boulder Longmont route into the front range rail budget. Can you speak to that?
Sure. There's been no request at this point to, what I think you're referring to is our fast tracks internal savings account. Has about $190 million, and it's intended to be, it was intended by, I think, a board about John Taylor's time, when he was on the board, maybe even, roughly about then, to start putting the money together to finish our 4 unfinished fast tracks corridors. And the biggest gorilla by far is the Northwest Corridor. That money's controlled by the RTD board. And that discussion, you know, if it comes up, will be later. But we are working closely with the Front Range Passenger Rail District. And Front Range Passenger Rail District, RTD, CDOT, the Governor's Office, and CTIO, which is within CDOT, have all been charged by the legislature in recent statute to move forward with a series of reports of how we would work together to try to bring about Front Range Passenger Rail, and it would come up on the Northwest Corridor line. A lot of details to work out, a lot of money to be raised, but we're having some good conversation.
All right, a lot of details to be worked out, but a lot fleshed out today. I know you've got to run to your next meeting, so thank you so much for your time and your service on this issue. And we'll stick around for, you can keep your lavalier mic if you want people to hear what your next meeting is all about. But just in case you have to make a pit stop in the bathroom, maybe we'll just leave that here. So with that being said, thank you again. And join me in a round of applause. All right, speaking of keeping things moving forward, let's go around the room real quick. This is the hardest part of the event because I can't give the microphone to everybody here. But before I start with introductions around the room, I do want to recognize we have at least one other elected official here in the room. So thank you to our city council member Tina Marcus for being here today. And let's just go around the room. We'll start on this side. Just say who you are, and if you're with an organization, then maybe your organization.
I am Carl Morris with Energy Sense, Energy Efficiency.
Tina Funkhauser, Quarterly Real Estate Group.
Matthew Rogers with Aussie Pet Mobile Room Service.
Danielle Random with Smart Commute.
Chris Hagelin, City Boulder. Winter Fall with Enterprise for You.
Sherry Down, City of Boulder.
Philip Sidecheck, PUC Mortgage. Philip, student at the university. Eric Neal, Scale That Lily.
Olivia Temple, Voices for Children, Casa Boulder County.
John Terry with Boulder Chamber.
Mark Blue with Community Cycles.
Sorry, all the works in Boulder.
Yes.
Who cares about?
Scooter with Boulder Recycled Aggregate.
Kent Hogan with Boulder Recycled Aggregate.
Tina Marcus, Boulder City Council.
Daniel Howard, President of Office, and
Will Toor, Colorado Energy Office.
Mike Mills, Boulder Transportation Advisory Board.
James Sui, Boulder Meadows.
Charlie James, Kobe. Harvey Aaron, also Kobe. Jonathan Holly, Boulder Chamber. Yankees, not my name.
Michelle Gable on Parish, what's the future rate and foundations for leaders organizing on water and sustainability?
Tim Beal, Boulder Healthy Partners.
Jack Martin, Drag Queen, Colorado.
Kirsten Beal, UCAR.
Michael Wurzel, UCAR.
Rick Robles, Boulder County.
Lexi Davies, Big Cycles. Gary Sprung, Front Range. No, Gary Sprung with Community Cycles and Colorado Rail Transport.
Chuck Rock, All right, Landon Hilliard, Boulder County.
Keith Hansen, Boulder.
Peter Cranfield, Colorado, Car Share.
Chris Greeley, Lieutenant Boulder Couriers.
Clark Ryder, Steve Boulder.
Rachel Friend, Boulder Chamber and Phoenix Cycle. Say. Alex Blackburn, RTD. Greg Manigal, Martha Smith, Friends of Real Estate.
I'm Will Shepherd, Boulder Chamber.
Mayor, Boulder Chamber.
Michaela Brandon, Denver Regional Council of Government.
Hey, do we have anyone on the Zoom today?
No, we're just recording it for later.
Recording for posterity, thank you all for joining us. So as we go on, so we're gonna move on to some transportation connection updates with our indefatigable Darcy Gidget.
Thank you. I'm not sure I'm indefatigable, but here we are. Thank you all for being here today. Really appreciate your presence today. Just wanted to give you some really quick updates before we launch into our other two presentations. We've been really busy this summer. We've been working with the Transportation Legislation Review Committee, showed up at their meeting in August to testify in support of commute trip reduction legislation. And now we're watching the draft bills that are coming out of the TLRC. You might, if you're interested in taking a look at those drafts, scan the QR code here and it'll take you to the page that has the drafts of the 6 bills. Only 5 of those at most will be advanced to the legislature, and they're discussing those next week. So if there are any of those bills that you find particularly interesting and you'd like to advocate for, take a look at those. We're really watching draft bills 2 and 4 on increasing transportation mode choice, and that's kind of a planning bill. And then there's a proposal for local support of vulnerable road user projects, which is really interesting, and we're hoping that that will advance.
Thank you. I just did that.
Yeah. So, Elaine, come on over. You can take my order.
Hi, I just want to encourage everybody, Go-Tober's coming up, and this is a really fun challenge for every business where you're asking your employees not just to ride the bikes, but whatever they use for sustainable commutes or might try. So already this week, I have carpool, ridden a bike, the transit, and remote work. All of that counts during this challenge. We'd love to get more businesses in the community signed up. You'll have your individuals eligible for some great prizes, as well as just recognition for your business in a leaderboard that's regional. So you're competing with folks all around the Front Range and seeing, large businesses, smaller businesses, who ranks as supporting the most sustainable commute. So reach out, sign up, and we've got lots of resources. We're here to help you whether it's during this challenge or any other time, that we can be more sustainable communities.
Okay, great. Something that's kind of fun. Has anybody heard about Parking Day? Raise your hand. Have you been part of Parking Day ever? Parking Day started a while ago, lots of years ago, but it's the 19th annual this year. It starts tomorrow and it kind of goes all weekend. So it's Friday, Saturday, Sunday. We have a local member business here, Mariah Quish, who is a certified financial planner, and she is really interested in this idea, and she's taking it to her neighborhood. So we're going to show up. I'm going to go and take the kind of an exercise that people can do to talk about safety in their neighborhood streets. She's really interested in just having that conversation with her neighbors and others. It's going to be really fun. It's on Poplar Avenue, so stop by. I'll be there, and Mariah and her neighbors will be there. And it's just a really great opportunity to have that conversation about safety on our neighborhood streets. So there's a QR code to an article this year about the meaning of Parking Day now, which is really about policy and advancing some of these policies that can help increase safety and spaces for people everywhere. And finally, it's Transportation Demand Management Week. Yay, who's heard of this? Anybody? It's very lucky. It's our field. My friends at the Denver Regional Council of Governments know all about this. So those of us who work in Transportation Demand Management are really advancing and promoting this week all the different ways that we can help reduce carbon pollution and go sustainably. We'll hear more about that from both of our following presenters. If you're using an alternate mode or you're promoting a way that your business or yourself are doing this, please use the hashtag and tag us, and we will share your posts as well. So with that, I'm going to hand the mic over to our special guest, Will Toor, Executive Director of the Colorado Energy Office, to talk about all the ways that his department is moving forward with carbon reduction policies. Oh, you don't have a slide, but I will give you this. Where would you like to put it?
If you could do both.
Have a recording.
One is for the recording and then one is for the read. So the lavalier one will catch you on the recording.
Yes. Well, thank you. It's great to be here. And what I'm going to do is probably take a few minutes to talk about sort of the overall economy-wide strategy that the state is taking on meeting our climate pollution reduction goals, and then spend a little bit more time talking specifically about kind of the land use and transportation work. So, I've been in this job now for 5.5 years. Started as energy office director when Derek Hollis was elected governor. And I've been sort of lucky to have a lot of really fun jobs over my lifetime, but this is by far the best. Like getting to work for a governor who was just passionate about clean energy and climate change. And with the legislature, which, while we may sometimes have some disagreements on the best way to get there or what the most sort of feasible policy is directionally aligned, so that we're all rowing in the same direction. And then over the last 4 years, having a federal government that is also aligned, that is just putting enormous wind in our sails through things like the Infrastructure Act and especially the Inflation Reduction Act. It's sort of remarkable how many weeks, my week starts with a call from the Department of Energy or Department of Agriculture saying, okay, there's another $1 billion coming to Colorado to support rural electric co-ops and transitioning away from coal into renewables, or $20 million more this week to support your work on building decarbonization. It's just been really a remarkable federal-state partnership. But going back to 2019, the legislature for the first time adopted climate targets for the state. We have a goal now of cutting greenhouse gas emission in half by 2030 from 2005 levels and getting to net zero by 2050. After the targets were set, the governor really charged the energy office with convening a multi-agency effort and working with stakeholders across the state, trying to figure out, well, how the heck are we actually going to achieve these targets? And that effort has really focused primarily on the 2030 targets. 2050 targets are great, but none of us are going to be around to be accountable for them. So we need to start taking action that sets the stage for those. but 2030 is far enough away that infrastructure investments can really sort of change course on emissions, but close enough that there can be some accountability to it, and that's what we really focused on. What we saw was that there are really 5 major sectors that are responsible for the bulk of GHG emissions in the state. It's electricity, transportation, methane leaks from the oil and gas industry, other industrial emissions, and emissions from burning fossil fuels in buildings. And so we've really structured our programs and policies around how do we drive down emissions in those sectors in ways that will be good for the economy of Colorado, will help to save residents money, and will improve people's quality of life. And what that's translated into is about 110 different pieces of legislation. Not going to run through all of them, but that have really sort of set the framework for action in every one of these areas. Certainly the deepest reductions we're seeing are in the electricity sector, where it's just a remarkable transformation. Colorado used to be one of the most coal-heavy states in the nation. By the end of this decade, every single coal plant in the state will be retired. We are now on a pathway, was just looking at the latest numbers as of last week. They still adopted electric resource plans. We're in a pathway to between 88 and 89% emission reduction by the end of the decade. Here in Excel service territory, we're going to be in a grid that's about 80% renewable by the end of the decade. That's remarkable progress. That's enabled by the fact that essentially there's low cost wind and solar resources available that are cheaper than the legacy coal resources. So that's just been a sort of really powerful driver of emissions reductions. We also know that a big part of the story is going to be taking that clean electricity and using it to decarbonize other sectors, whether it's electrifying transportation, moving to electric heat pumps instead of gas-powered furnaces and water heaters in buildings, moving to the use of things like industrial heat pumps and other technologies that can reduce emissions in the industrial sector. When it comes to transportation, transportation in some ways is one of the more difficult areas to work on. When we're dealing with oil and gas, electricity generation, or industrial emissions, you've got a relatively small number of entities that you're working with. There's a few utilities in the state that are responsible for most of the emissions. There's a limited number of oil and gas operators out there. There's a regulatory structure through our Air Quality Commission and our Public Utilities Commission that allows us to address these largely through either air or utility regulation. But when you get to transportation and the buildings, all of a sudden you're talking about millions and millions of individual people and businesses making decisions about whether it's how they're going to build their buildings, where the buildings are going to be built, what kind of vehicles they're going to use, whether they're going to be using vehicles or something else for transportation. And it's just a far more complicated mix of actors, and is not something that can be dealt with as simply as those other sectors. So the approach the state has taken on transportation, I think, really focuses in on 2 major areas. One is electrification of transportation. We think that there is no route to deep emissions reductions that does not involve switching from primarily gasoline and diesel vehicles to primarily electric vehicles, and probably some role for hydrogen in heavy duty trucking. And in that arena, the state has put together a pretty comprehensive policy approach that really tries to target all of the major sort of barriers and opportunities on electrification. We have incentives for both individuals and businesses for acquiring electric vehicles. We've got the nation's largest state EV tax credit, $5,000. There's an additional $2,500 bump if you get a small and cheap electric vehicle. So if you're getting an EV that has an MSRP under $35,000, there's an extra $2,500 bump. We've put together a set of programs that are fairly unique in the nation that are focused on helping low-income Coloradans get electric vehicles, including essentially a cash for clunkers program in which folks who meet certain income targets or, are below certain income levels who have older and more polluting vehicles can turn it in and get essentially a voucher for up to $6,000 that can be stacked on top of those tax credits to help them switch to an electric vehicle. And that program has been super popular. We actually just allocated $9 million more to it to expand it because all the money we had allocated got used so quickly. We've also focused not just on passenger vehicles, but trucks. We have a tax credit for medium and heavy duty vehicles and have a set of programs out there to provide grant funding to help fleets transition to electric vehicles. And we're the first state in the country to have a statewide electric bike program where we both have a rebate program that's focused on low-income Coloradans that we're pretty much out of money on. We're doing the last bit of that right now, but a universal tax credit for e-bikes where any Colorado taxpayer is eligible for up to one e-bike a year, a $500 tax credit that you get at point of sale, with the bike shop keeping a little bit of that. We're also doing a lot of investment in EV infrastructure. We know that in addition to sort of making sure that EVs are affordable to people, the other big challenge is making sure that there's charging where they need it and they have confidence they can get where they need to go. And through a variety of state investments and utility investments, just dramatically expanding the network of charging stations across the state. All this has added up to Colorado sort of moving up the ranks. When I started this job, about 2% of new vehicles that were sold in the state were electric vehicles. The last data we have which was second quarter of this year, we're up to 22%, puts us number 2 or 3 in the country behind California and maybe Washington State. So a lot happening on the electrification front, and it's moving on a really good trajectory. But the other half of it is that all of the issues that you're working on, it's the issues around modal choice and vehicle miles traveled. And pretty quickly, as we started to work on this, we came to the conclusion that, well, part of the answer was around infrastructure and the need to invest more in transit and the need to invest more in bicycle pedestrian infrastructure. That a really big part of it was around land use. And that essentially, if you look at Colorado over the last couple of decades, we just have not built enough housing to keep up with the demand for housing. And many of our most successful communities, maybe one that I'm standing in right here, where much of the job growth has been and many of the good jobs are available, have made it really difficult to build much housing historically. And so you see housing being built out in the Eastern Plains and in Northern Colorado and in places where people have very long commutes to get to work. When we do surveys of, what are the number one issue on Colorado's mind, what we see by and large is that the cost of housing is the biggest single issue on people's minds. Well, this is an opportunity to tackle climate and affordability and our economy all at once. That making housing more available in the places where people don't need to do long drives to get to work or to get wherever they need to go during the day is something that helps to tackle housing affordability and is one of the most impactful things that we can do to reduce emissions associated with transportation. So 2 years ago, we started working on this. I'd have to say it was sort of a big moment when we started to talk about this publicly. In some of the interagency conversations, there was sort of can we really say this? This is gonna make folks nervous. But the governor took a look at it and basically said, well, not only are we going to talk about this, we can do all of these things. And that led, a year ago to a really big omnibus piece of land use legislation that failed in the legislature, but it failed upwards, and it set the stage for conversations over the next year that led to what I think is the most successful legislative session anywhere in the country on land use. And the two pieces really relevant here are the transit-oriented development bill, which requires, it's slightly complicated, but it essentially requires cities to assure that they are zoning to allow multifamily housing that on average is allows at least 40 units to the acre along high frequency transit routes. And then going along with that, a bill removing minimum parking requirements along high frequency transit routes. We'll be releasing modeling a little bit later this fall on the impact of those policies. But based on our preliminary results, we think that this is going to make hundreds of thousands of new housing units across the Colorado Front Range, primarily economically viable that were not viable before. And that the vast majority of them are going to be in places where people have easy access to daily destinations and will have far lower vehicle miles traveled than you see across the region as a whole. Last thing that I'm going to say is just one piece of federal funding that we recently received from the Environmental Protection Agency. Climate pollution reduction grant includes $60 million for a new local government climate accelerator, which will be a grant program to support local policy adoption in the realms of transportation, buildings, and land use reform. So to the extent that folks are engaged with local governments, I think this could be a really powerful tool to help local governments sort of push the envelope further on these policies. And with that, I'll sort of.
All right. Well, before you take off, let's see if we have one or two quick questions from the audience. And thanks for leaving us with that great teaser on the grants too.
Thanks very much, Will. Every time I drive out or take the bus to the airport at GIA, I see these enormous greenfield developments out in Weld County. They're just massive suburban sprawl, single family, completely isolated from any jobs or shopping opportunities or anything. And I wonder what we can do to discourage that kind of development that we're not doing now. And I'm especially curious if, for example, CDOT would simply refuse to widen any highways that are leading to these communities and just say, if you're going to build your way into sprawl, you're going to live with it yourself. Do you have any suggestions for how else to deal with it?
So two thoughts on that. First, I think that the key thing that we need to do, which we've taken to the big steps on this year, is to make it possible to build housing closer to where the jobs are and closer to where people want to be on a daily basis. When you make it really hard to build in the cities, the development is going to take place out there. So I think that's one big piece of the answer. On the CDOT side, there's a couple of pieces there that I would say. One that a really interesting development. Colorado in late 21 became effectively the first state, maybe the second state, depending how you look at it, to adopt a transportation greenhouse gas planning standard in which CDOT and DRCOG really have to look at the GHG impact of the network that they're building, and then are essentially held to a greenhouse gas emissions budget associated with that. That did have really big impacts on the DRCOG arena of shifting about $900 million in the long-term plan from highway expansion, largely focused on Central I-25, into things like BRT corridors and bike ped improvements along our arterials. And so I think that there's a pretty good planning framework there. That said, there's definitely still more to do. We don't have a policy framework in place yet that is automatically going to be urban sprawl.
Hey, I wonder how you all are tracking Justice 40 and the idea, especially with the Inflation Reduction Act, that you were speaking of, that 40% of these funds are supposed to go to equity and to justice and to front-end communities. And so I'm wondering if you're all making your own commitments internally. And then how you're addressing that, especially knowing that you have to be engaging with these communities who have been left out of these conversations for a long time. And sometimes they seem like they're very technical questions, and sometimes we're really just talking about like how do we want to live. So wonder how you're doing with that and what grassroots organizations can do to plug in and support.
Yeah, so great question. And for folks who may not be familiar with it, the Inflation Reduction Act has a just supporting requirement that essentially 40% of the benefits need to flow to what in Colorado we would describe as under our statutes as disproportionately impacted communities or low-income Coloradans. And first, I would say that I think the federal agencies have been taking that very seriously. And so for all of the federal funds, we have to structure the applications and structure the programs to make sure that we are meeting those minimum requirements. The state has also, in multiple pieces of legislation where there's sort of allocations of funding, has set either minimum requirements in terms of percentages that need to go into DICs, or has set essentially preferences where there's not necessarily a percentage, but it's designed so that there's, say, a larger incentive or extra outreach to make sure that there are resources to support those communities. But an example of sort of the way that we've been thinking about it, we recently released grant funding to local governments through the Federal Energy Efficiency Community Block Grant Program. We ended up structuring that as essentially grants to support staff capacity, almost solely in either small rural communities or disproportionately impacted communities, where we had heard the feedback that they couldn't even apply for all of the funding that was available because they didn't have the staff capacity to be able to do so. So that's an example of where we're trying to sort of create the conditions that will allow people to actually access the resources that are out there.
So, and also on that note, definitely, we have an environmental justice ombudsperson through the Department of Public Health and Environment and an advisory board that works on those things. That actually, I think 2 of the board members are from Boulder. So connect with me afterwards. I'm happy to connect with those. Got time for one more question.
Will, thank you. I recently told the copyright about the state's a short grant application for CP cargo backs, just delivery. They applied and they were selected. Could you tell us if you know the status update in terms of how much more funding is available for that program in case there are other businesses in the area that are interested in applying?
So I actually don't know the answer to that question.
All right, well, we finally stumped you after 20 years of public service. Well done. But and on that note, though, thank you for your time, your service, and this is the great thing about Will Sports. There's honesty in politics. Instead of making up an answer, we will endeavor to look for those answers as part of your Boulder Chamber Transportation Connection team as well. So thank you again. Round of applause for our directors. All right, so before we move on to our last speaker, I wanted to make sure that people know there is an amazing door prize. It's so amazing that I don't even know what it is. There's an amazing door prize, so feel free to stay throughout the remainder of the presentation here, and then we will dispense with the door prize and have some amazing conversation. But before we get started with that, we are miking him up as we speak. So join me in welcoming Michael Wurzel with the University Center for Atmospheric Research, because while it's TDM week this week, it is carbon reduction week next week. Is that right?
It's the same thing.
Same thing. Same thing. All right. So we are word efficient and energy efficient.
Easily.
So.
I just want to say one more quick thing in introduction of Michael. UCAR won the Bike to Work Day Business Challenge for an excellent, large size business, over 100 employees. So around the region. So UCAR beat out all the Denver businesses and all the businesses all around the Dr. region. So this is amazing. We really wanted to celebrate UCAR today and give Michael the opportunity to talk about all the ways they do that. They're really exemplary. So let's give it up for Michael.
Hello, everyone. Before we get started and jump in today on this little transportation journey, it's been a while since we've moved. So if you want to, and you can, feel free to stand up, start moving your shoulders forward a little bit, get the blood flowing after that lunge, move your shoulders back. If you really want to go wild, you can put your arms straight up in the air, wiggle those fingers. All right, thank you very much. I'd like to give a shout out in the room to UCAR Sustainability Coordinator, Kirsten Bailey. She's the one who runs many of UCAR's day-to-day sustainability operations, including some of these transportation programs. So thank you very much, Bailey. So some of the people in the room may not know what UCAR and NCAR do. And we're a federally funded research and development center, largely funded by the National Science Foundation. We have a staff of about 1,400 people, mostly scientists, analysts, and technicians. And the way you can think about the difference between UCAR and NCAR is that UCAR or NCAR is the National Center for Atmospheric Research. So they do cutting edge research in atmospheric, sun, and earth system science, whereas UCAR supports the NCAR mission and we do facilities maintenance, IT, HR, that kind of thing. And we run several facilities in the Boulder area. We have the iconic Mesa Lab building on Table Mesa Drive, which is open to the public. It's an educational and scientific facility. In addition, we run a research aviation facility and 2 aircraft at the Broomfield Airport. We have a solar observatory on the Mauna Loa volcano in Hawaii, and we have a supercomputer in Cheyenne, Wyoming. And I highly advise that if you're ever passing through the Cheyenne area and you want to go see, tour a supercomputing facility, it's a truly fascinating experience. So that's what we do and the facilities we have. All right, so this was a screenshot of the staff portal on the day I was putting this presentation together. And I think it just gives you a pretty good idea kind of like what's going on at UCAR on a day-to-day basis. So here we have the acknowledgement that 2023 was record-setting temperatures and it's likely 2024 will be too. We have a call for scientific awards. We're putting out a framework for geoengineering. You might ask yourself, why would we need a framework for geoengineering? So I just want to put this plug in today, is that's where we are on the climate crisis at the moment. We're actually studying a framework for geoengineering because when you listen to Will and you hear about all the great things the state of Colorado is doing, and you hear about all the great things all the communities in the United States are doing with the federal funding, climate change is a global problem. And even though EVs are becoming ubiquitous, rooftop solar, and all the climate solutions that Will was talking about, emissions continue to go up. And as emissions continue to go up, we will continue to see record-setting temperatures. So that's just today's kind of climate gut check, is that, you know, that's what's happening. And so we're down to the last-ditch efforts looking into things like geoengineering. All right, so on to transportation. The RTD EcoPass program is the core or linchpin of UCAR's sustainability and transportation opportunities. I apologize. I need a minute to try to pull up my notes here. Well, I'm just gonna keep going so I can weigh this. I just kind of had a rough outline. But so I really have to hand it to RTD here. The transition from the vintage EcoPass card to the EcoPass portal and online mobile app was nearly seamless, and our employees and UCAR staff as operators really appreciated this transition. In addition to this, it was a large increase in the it was a huge improvement in the user experience, which we really appreciated. The EcoPass is well liked and well used in our organization. So the average UCAR commute is 12 to 20 miles from the town surrounding Boulder. And so the EcoPass gets a ton of use from our employees. And it's a highly valued and beneficial transit option. And it's it's really the best deal for employers like UCAR to give your employees a chance to start using transit. And I was an avid cyclist at one point in my life, but a lot of people don't find cycling to be the easiest, the simplest, the safest jump to get from a single occupancy vehicle to an alternative form of transit. And really, the RTD EcoPass and RTD services offer this. And I just want to say, as we go through all of these transportation options, as an individual, I've done each of these very often throughout my life. So when I was living in Tennessee, I was an avid cyclist for 10 years. And that's because cycling was the easiest, the safest, the quickest way to get around the city of Chattanooga. When I moved to Breckenridge, Colorado, cycling got very cold and very hard very fast. So I started using the Breckenridge Free Ride and the Summit Stage transit systems, which are great transit systems up in the mountains. Now that I live in Denver and commute to Boulder a few times a week, I drive my EV into Boulder, and then once I get to Boulder, I either use B-Cycle or the UCAR shuttle. So what we try to do at UCAR is meet people where they're at, give them an all of the above strategy for getting around Boulder or getting to and from Boulder. And we really just try to support them in their alternative transit or multimodal needs. So UCAR shuttle. Many of you have probably seen these UCAR shuttles driving around the Boulder area. So these shuttles provide transit for not only commuters getting from RTD stops to our facilities, but also to get around our various facilities in Boulder during business hours. So the shuttles run Monday through Friday, 6:45 a.m. to 6 p.m. And they run every 30 to 60 minutes, depending on the time of day. And they're available to all UCAR staff, interns, and visitors. So these shuttles are very popular with our staff, and all the shuttles are equipped with bike racks, which really allows the shuttles to offer that first mile, last mile connection. So we really appreciate our shuttle program. So on the bikes. People love bikes. I love bikes. Everyone who rents one of our fleet bikes gets a helmet and a lock. And these bikes are available to our staff, our visitors, and our interns. And the really unique thing about these bikes is that what we find when we survey the staff, visitors, or interns who come and check out these bikes anywhere from a few days to a few weeks to a few months is that the bike becomes their best option for getting around Boulder. And between the bikes and the shuttles, we find that our staff, visitors, and interns have no problem getting around Boulder. And I just have to say, we get visitors from all over the country, all over the world. And when they return these bikes to us, it's really heartwarming when they tell us, man, thank you so much for this bicycle. This was the way I got around Boulder, and this bike made my stay here really great. So when we hear those stories, it really makes us committed to offering cycling options to our staff and visitors. So Boulder B-Cycle. UCAR has been a supporter of Boulder B-Cycle since its inception in 2011. And we have 2 B-Cycle stations between our Center Green and Foothills Lab campuses. And B-Cycle is actually the quickest way for any bicycle to get between those two facilities connected via a greenway. And about half our staff have B-Cycle memberships. And on any given year, our staff take 10,000 trips on B-Cycle and ride anywhere from 20,000 to 30,000 miles. So B-Cycle is well liked and well used at UCAR. But one thing about our B-Cycle program is about 3% of our members, we offer free annual memberships to all of our staff and free month memberships to all of our visitors for however long they're in Boulder. And we have 3% of our members are super users. So they really boost up those trips and mileage numbers. So within the core of Boulder that B-Cycle services, B-Cycle is a great option for our users. So when it comes to bike parking and cycling amenities, UCAR has it all. We are an American, we're an American League of American Cyclists Gold certified business, and every facility is designed to meet the needs of riders. So every facility has outdoor bike racks, outdoor covered bike parking, outdoor badge access bike parking, and indoor bike parking. In addition, in total, we have 216 bike parking spots across our facilities. Every facility also has showers for riders. So with Boulder's exceptional cycling culture and infrastructure, there's a critical mass of cyclists at UCAR, and you can tell this, as Darcy mentioned, we got to win the Bike to Work Day Challenge, which was super exciting for us. Not our first time winning. We'd like to keep that going. So we have tons of various cycling amenities to offer, and we're really proud of supporting these. So I want to talk about EV charging for a minute. And if you've been zoned out, I would like you to just listen. I want to go deep on this real fast. So, I just don't think most people realize how game-changing EVs are from an energy efficiency and greenhouse gas reduction standpoint. And I know EVs are more expensive. I know there's range anxiety, but the greatest downside to EVs is people's lack of familiarity with electric vehicles. It's incumbent advantage. It's 100 years of the internal combustion engine vehicle, which I'll call the ICE vehicle from now on. So I'm just going to give you an example. My Tesla Model Y has a 75 kilowatt battery pack. That's about a 308 mile range. The equivalent energy to that would be a 2 1/3 gallon gas tank. So imagine an ICE vehicle with a 2 or 3 gallon gas tank. You can't imagine that, because it would be useless. So, I commute about 60 miles a day to Denver to Boulder and back. And when I charge my vehicle overnight, it's about $2 in electricity for that 60-mile commute. In my old beater Subaru, at $3.50 a gallon, 60 miles, that was about $10 in gas every day. So that's a 5x savings in cost. But it's not really about the fuel savings. It's not just about the fuel savings. It's about the overall energy it takes to move these vehicles. And the fact is that energy is drastically reduced. So think tank Electrify America has put out a study that said, if you were to switch every single light and medium duty vehicle in the USA today to an electric vehicle and charge those at overnight and off-peak hours, there's already enough electricity on the electricity grid to charge all of those vehicles. I know, it's mind-boggling. So in America today, we burn anywhere from 20 to 21 million barrels of oil every day. Now, most of that is associated with light and medium duty vehicles. Some of it's heavy duty for trucking and things like that. But so overnight, we could stop burning 20 million barrels of oil a day and charge all of our electric vehicles without even improving the electric grid. I know, it's mind-blowing. So that's why the fossil fuel industry is terrified of EVs. Once people understand how much more efficient they are. So for daily driving and standard fleet use, conventional vehicles really can't compete with EVs when it comes to fuel costs and maintenance costs. And while EVs are still an evolving product, that's what I love about them. They're still improving. There haven't really, I mean, there just really haven't been that many improvements to internal combustion engine vehicles in the last 30 years. You know, there are hybrids, which are partial EVs. They're getting 60 miles to the gallon at best, around 30 standard, whereas EVs are getting 100, 150 mpgs to the gallon. So when you look at the total cost of ownership of an EV, even though it's more expensive upfront, it's oftentimes cheaper during the total life of the vehicle. And I just want to say this, it's hard to explain how nice it is to just wake up every day and your vehicle is just charged. Like, it's just like charging your iPhone. It's crazy. And then you're like, oh, it cost me $2 in electricity to get to and from work today? Wow, this is awesome. So you can see from the graph right here, how also EVs produce a fraction of the greenhouse gas emissions of ICE vehicles. So this graph pertains to UCAR. We retired a Chevy Silverado 2500 and we got a Ford F-150 Lightning. And the Chevy Silverado produced 2.5 tons of greenhouse gases annually. The Ford Lightning produces about half that, 1.2. And by 2030, that Ford Lightning will produce 100 kilograms of CO2 annually. So this is, and the other final thing is there are no tailpipe emissions when it comes to EVs. So initial studies show that in communities with high EV adoption, you have improved localized air quality. And I love great air quality, so that's really, that makes me really happy. At UCAR, we have level 2 charging available at all of our facilities, Center Green, Foothills, Mesa Lab, and our research aviation facility. This gives an electric vehicle between 20 and 25 miles of charge per hour. These charging stations are available to employees and visitors and the public at the reasonable price of 25 cents a kilowatt hour. That covers the cost of electricity, the networking and annual maintenance fees of the chargers themselves, and provides about 40 to 50 miles of charge for $3.30. And these also support our first 3 electric vehicles. We have 2 Hyundai Konas and we have a Ford F-150 Lightning. And then what we're really most excited about is we just got a grant for several $100,000 to deploy EV charging, DC fast charging across our facilities. And this will allow us to basically start transitioning our ICE vehicles out and adopting EVs. So our whole fleet runs on 5-year leasing cycles, which will allow us to kind of do an orderly transition of retiring ICE vehicles and leasing EVs. And one thing I'd really like to say, we have a 55 vehicle fleet. We have four shuttles. Those 4 shuttles alone make up almost 50% of our fleet emissions. So we're going to work on electrifying our shuttles first. We plan on having 2 electric shuttles by the end of 2025 and 2 more by the end of 2028. So we're really excited about reducing our fleet emissions 60 to 70% by 2030 and being near zero by 2035. Okay, so last slide, work from home. So does remote and hybrid work change everything? Definitely. 20% of our organization is remote, 55% is hybrid, 25% is is on-site at all times. So that means 1,400 staff on average. We have 600 to 800 people on site, with the rest working remotely. Estimates show that moving to the hybrid and remote work environment reduced our annual greenhouse gas emissions 2,000 metric tons annually. So this was something like 5% of our total organization emissions were reduced. So do we need as many parking places as we have now? No, we don't. Do we need as much office space as we have now? Probably not. What are we doing about this? We just hired design firm Perkins and Will to go through a year-long master planning process where they're evaluating all of our scientific and operational needs and then coming up with a 30-year facilities maintenance or facilities blueprint for our organization. And we're super excited about this because this will allow us to not only refine our transportation programs, but also redefine our buildings to hopefully be zero emissions in the future.
All right. Okay, so I know we're running a little short on time. That was an amazing presentation. I think I'm glad we only have a few Boulder Chamber staff here because they all quit and start working for UCAR after all this. But in all seriousness, do we have any questions?
Sure, why not? The lightning went down so precipitously to 2030. How was that? Same car.
All right, why did the lightning vehicle go down so quickly?
Yeah.
That's because today, charging on Boulder's grid, Excel Energy, they're about 50 to 55% renewable, I think. By 2030, they're supposed to be 85 to 90% renewable. So as they increase the renewable energy on the grid, that means more of the electrons going into this lightning's battery pack will be from renewable, therefore lowering its carbon footprint.
Great question. All right, with that, we are going to move on to the next thing. Quick round of applause though for Michael and his presentation. Thank you so much for getting the blood flowing again. So getting a little. So speaking of getting blood flowing again, we're going to hand the mic back over now.
Okay, I want Will to have a lavalier mic. Is there one available?
Oh, actually, I need to get the one from Michael back here.
Okay. Oh, I will take off the mic. Mike, take off your mic. Okay, we have a very special final little note for you. Oh, you got one. That's great. You got one now. Okay. All right. I'm going to hand it over to my colleague Will to talk about a local program and also the very special surprise that's available to you today.
We'll all talk about this. So TDM week is going on, carbon reduction. It's not just this week, it's every week. It's definitely the rest of the year. The city of Boulder is promoting, supporting, funding a great initiative called Boulder DMP. So if you were involved with, friends with, frequent a business downtown or in Boulder Junction, sorry the slide is not there. BoulderDMP.com has lots of information. It's a fund matching program to reduce single occupancy trips to and from work. It is constrained to the downtown Cajun district, to the central area general district, as well as Boulder Junction. Both of these districts provide free bus passes, or at least there are free transit passes available to all employees of those areas. And so any business who contributes funds can claim a 50% reduction on that, but their full amount is matched by the city of Boulder. So it's a big deal. We're paying people not to drive. There's also our team at the Economic Council with Chamber secured a grant. So the startup funds that I mentioned, the city would match, can be covered by that grant. So it's essentially a $0 cost for any business in either Boulder Junction or downtown to get involved in this program, which we're currently piloting through the end of the year. And these workforce grants are valid through the end of the year. So there's still time to do this. I'm happy to talk further. BoulderCleanQ.com for details. Thanks. And now let's all stand and celebrate that we can commute actively because our prizes are actually stashed underneath the chairs.
Five lucky people.
If you want to take a fun trip and explore our amazing state, we have a large capacity coach, the bus staying program. Let's open up and figure out
So there are many of their routes you can explore, Glenwood Springs, kind of southwest Colorado, the New Colorado Springs, lots of great options.
Four miles, yeah, 3 routes on bus day. There are 5 of these packets with 2 tickets each, so there's a round trip for you. So look and make sure that there's not one of your seat. And thank you everybody very much for joining us today. We stay in network. There's still a little bit more food. We really appreciate you being here today. And we'll send out the slides at the YouTube link as soon as we have it. Thank you so much.